I remember the way the afternoon sun streamed through the large bay windows of the event hall, hitting the pastel balloons in a way that made them glow almost magically. I was wearing a soft lavender dress that I had chosen for its simplicity, hoping it would make me blend in with the celebration rather than stand out. My sister, Emma, 26, looked radiant in her flowing cream maternity gown, her round belly cradled tenderly in her hands as guests cooed over the adorable little outfits she had arranged on the gift table. I should have felt happiness, should have celebrated with every ounce of my heart. But instead, I felt a familiar knot forming deep in my chest, a tight, suffocating ache that I had learned to carry silently. Mom had been hovering near the center of the room, chatting animatedly with my aunts and cousins, her perfume wafting through the air like it always did, the one I had hated since childhood because it seemed to announce her presence before she even entered a room. And then she saw me, or rather, she decided it was time to make me feel small. She leaned toward me, her eyes glinting with that subtle mix of disappointment and superiority she always managed to perfect. "You'll never give me a grandchild," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to pierce through the noise of the gathering. I froze, the words bouncing in my skull like a cruel echo. The room seemed to tilt, the pastel decorations blurring around the edges as if reality itself had shifted. For a second, I didn't know if I had heard her correctly. Surely she couldn't have said that out loud in front of everyone, right? But the smirk that played on her lips told me otherwise. It wasn't just a careless remark. It was intentional. My heart sank, and a flicker of anger rose inside me, followed by a strange, hollow feeling. All my life, I had tried to be the good daughter. I had worked hard, built my career, and carried myself with quiet dignity, never daring to step out of line, never daring to question her authority. And yet, here I was, in the middle of what should have been a joyous celebration, dismissed, belittled, and made painfully aware that my achievements, or lack of a family of my own, were somehow a failure in her eyes. I forced a polite smile, keeping my lips tight as I nodded toward my sister. "Congratulations, Emma," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. She smiled warmly, squeezing my hand. She didn't know about Mom's comment yet, but I could see her eyes flicker with concern as she sensed the tension radiating off me. I wanted to tell her, to burst into tears and confess how humiliated and hurt I felt, but I didn't. I had learned early on that showing weakness around Mom only invited more criticism. As the party went on, I drifted to the quieter corner near the dessert table, pretending to be busy arranging cupcakes while my mind replayed Mom's words over and over. "You'll never give me a grandchild." Each repetition stung like a branding iron. I thought about my career, the late nights spent at the law firm, the sacrifices I had made to be independent and successful. And yet, to Mom, none of it mattered because I hadn't followed the path she envisioned: a husband, children, and a life she could control and boast about at family gatherings. I watched as guests laughed, clinking their champagne glasses and cooing over tiny baby socks, and a wave of resentment washed over me. I loved my sister, truly, and I wanted her happiness, but part of me ached at the realization that my own milestones, or rather, the absence of them, were a source of ridicule in my own home. I felt invisible, dismissed, and oddly furious, not at Emma, but at the way Mom had managed to make me feel like a failure simply by daring to exist outside her expectations. I wandered outside for a breath of air, stepping onto the balcony that overlooked the small garden. The scent of roses and freshly cut grass filled my lungs, but it did little to soothe the turmoil inside. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, trying to anchor myself. I asked myself, silently, why her words mattered so much. Why did they have the power to make me feel like I was nothing, like all my achievements, all my independence, were irrelevant? As I leaned against the railing, I began to replay our childhood in fragments, Mom's constant comparisons, the way she had always praised Emma for her compliance and ridiculed me for my independence, the subtle digs disguised as advice or concern. It was a pattern I had learned to ignore, but tonight, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the party hall, it felt unbearable. I realized that her words weren't just about grandchildren. They were about control, about power, about her need to assert dominance in every corner of my life. By the time I returned inside, the party was in full swing, laughter and music echoing through the hall. I smiled, forced a few polite words here and there, and accepted a cup of punch from a passing waiter. I watched Emma cradling her belly, her smile radiant, her joy untainted. I wanted to scream, to tell Mom exactly what I thought of her, to throw her criticism back in her face. But I didn't. I had learned that confrontation with her never ended well. It only fueled her, only gave her more ammunition. Instead, I decided to let the night continue, masking the storm inside me. I floated from one conversation to another, nodding, laughing lightly, making small talk with distant relatives who didn't know or care about the tension unfolding. But beneath the surface, a plan began to take shape. Not a plan of confrontation or immediate revenge, but a quiet, burning determination to prove that her words would not define me. That I would live my life on my terms, not hers. The night ended with everyone gathered for cake and photos, smiles plastered on faces, cameras flashing. I stood beside Emma, hands on her shoulders, and smiled for the camera, even as my mind buzzed with thoughts of independence, resilience, and the silent promise I made to myself. One day, the world would see that I was not the failure she claimed me to be. Walking home later that evening, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle, I felt a strange mixture of anger, hurt, and determination. Mom's words had cut deep, but they had also ignited something within me, a fire I hadn't realized existed. I wasn't sure yet what it would look like, or how it would unfold, but I knew one thing: I would not let her definition of success or womanhood dictate my life. As I turned the key in my apartment door and stepped inside, I let out a long, slow breath. I was alone, but for the first time in years, I felt a quiet sense of purpose. Mom's words had been meant to diminish me, but instead, they had sparked something powerful, the resolve to live life on my own terms, to create my own happiness, and, if the opportunity ever came, to make her see that her judgments could not contain me. Tonight, the party had ended, the decorations would be taken down, and everyone would return to their own lives, oblivious to the inner storm I had weathered. But I knew that this was only the beginning of my journey to reclaim control over my own narrative, to prove to myself, and perhaps one day to Mom, that my worth was not tied to expectations or comparisons, and that I could thrive, regardless of her approval. That night, after the baby shower, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the city outside my window doing little to quiet the storm inside me. My mother's words echoed in my head like a cruel refrain, sharp, unrelenting, impossible to silence. "You'll never give me a grandchild." I turned over, pressing my face into the pillow, but no amount of shifting could bury the hurt. It wasn't just what she said, it was what it meant. It was every sideways glance at family gatherings, every passive-aggressive comment about my career phase, every disappointed sigh when I showed up to holidays alone. I was 28, successful, independent, but to her, that didn't count for much. To Mom, success only meant one thing: being a wife and a mother. And since I was neither, I was incomplete in her eyes. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, my hair a tangled mess, and the exhaustion on my face wasn't just from lack of sleep. It was from years of trying to prove my worth to someone who seemed determined not to see it. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the sunlight crawl slowly across the buildings. I thought about calling Emma, about telling her what Mom had said, but I couldn't. It wasn't her fault, and I didn't want to spoil her happiness. When I arrived at work, my coworker and best friend, Nora, immediately noticed something was off. "You look like you fought a war," she said, handing me a fresh cup of coffee from the break room. I let out a humorless laugh. "Something like that." She raised an eyebrow, concern softening her features. "What happened?" I hesitated for a moment before telling her everything. The baby shower, Mom's words, the way I felt humiliated and small. As I spoke, the anger I had been holding in began to surface, my voice trembling not from sadness this time, but from rage. "She said that to you? At your sister's shower?" Nora's expression hardened. "That's cruel, even for her." "Yeah," I said quietly, staring down at my coffee. "It's not new, though. She's been like this my whole life. I just thought maybe by now she'd stop seeing me as some kind of disappointment." Nora sighed, her tone both sympathetic and firm. "You know, sometimes it doesn't matter how much you achieve. People like your mom only see what they want to see. You can't live your life trying to fill the holes in hers." Her words struck me harder than I expected. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew she was right. Mom's expectations weren't about love. They were about control. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work, trying to drown the bitterness with productivity. I stayed late at the office, volunteered for extra projects, and avoided family calls. When Mom's name appeared on my phone, I let it ring out. I didn't have the emotional energy to pretend everything was fine. Then one evening, as I was wrapping up an email, I got a message from Emma. "Emma, hey, I know things were weird at the shower. Mom mentioned she might have said something hurtful. Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a while before typing back. "Me? I'm fine. It's not the first time, you know." "Emma? Yeah, I know. She means well, though. She just has a weird way of showing it." I smiled sadly at that. It was the same excuse we'd both used since childhood, the same justification for her sharp tongue and controlling ways. She means well. It was easier to say that than to admit the truth, that our mother's love came with conditions. Still, I didn't want to burden Emma. She was happy, and she deserved to be. So I changed the subject, asking about the baby's nursery, her doctor visits, the names she'd chosen. By the end of the conversation, she was laughing again, and for a moment, I felt lighter. But deep down, the wound remained open. One Saturday morning, about a month later, Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door in my pajamas, startled to see her standing there with a grocery bag in hand. "I brought muffins," she said, forcing a smile. "Mom," I sighed. "It's 8 in the morning. I thought we could have breakfast together. You've been avoiding me." Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp, probing. I stepped aside reluctantly, letting her in. She placed the muffins on the counter, moving around my kitchen like she owned the place. I watched her silently, my arms crossed. "So," she said after a while, settling onto a stool, "I talked to Emma yesterday. She said you've been busy. Always working." I nodded. "That's what jobs are, Mom. You work." She gave a tight smile, ignoring my sarcasm. "You know, honey, you're not getting any younger. You should think about settling down. Maybe starting a family before it's too late." I felt my jaw tighten. "Mom, please don't start this again. I'm just saying." "No." I cut her off, my voice firmer now. "You don't get to say that. Not after what you said at the shower." Her expression flickered, but only for a second. "Oh, for heaven's sake, you're still upset about that?" I was joking. "Joking?" I repeated, incredulous. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, and you call that a joke?" She sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. "You're too sensitive, Lily. You always have been. I just want what's best for you." What's best for me, or what's best for you? The silence that followed was heavy, electric. For the first time, I didn't back down. I met her gaze unflinching, as years of pent-up frustration boiled to the surface. "You've spent my whole life trying to fit me into your idea of happiness. You wanted me to be like Emma, married, pregnant, predictable. But I'm not her. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to apologize for that." She looked taken aback, her eyes softening slightly. But she didn't apologize. She never did. Instead, she stood up, smoothing her coat. "You'll understand someday," she said quietly. When it's too late. When she left, I felt both shaken and liberated. For the first time, I had stood up to her, not with anger, but with truth. In the following months, I began to focus more on myself. I took weekend trips, went to art galleries, met new people. I started dating again, not because I felt pressured to, but because I wanted to. I even met someone, Daniel, a quiet, kind architect who made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. For once, I felt like I was living for me, not to meet someone else's standards. Then, 6 months after the baby shower, my phone rang one evening. It was Emma, her voice trembling. "Lily, it's Mom. She's not doing well." My stomach dropped. What happened? She had a health scare. The doctors found something with her heart. They're keeping her overnight for tests. Within the hour, I was at the hospital, the sterile smell of disinfectant filling my nose as I rushed through the corridors. When I entered her room, she looked small, fragile, even. Tubes connected to her wrist, the heart monitor beeping steadily beside her bed. "Mom," I whispered, stepping closer. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw me, her face softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Lily," she said weakly, reaching for my hand. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, my throat tightening. Tears welled in her eyes. "I wasn't fair to you," she whispered. "I said things I shouldn't have. I wanted to see you happy. To see you loved." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to break. "You hurt me, Mom." "I know." Her grip tightened slightly. "But you've always been strong. I see that now. You've built a life for yourself, and I'm proud of you. I really am." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more than I had ever hoped for. For the first time, I saw her not as the critical mother who had haunted my self-worth, but as a woman, flawed, scared, and learning too late the cost of her words. As I sat beside her that night, holding her hand, I realized something important. Her approval didn't define me anymore. Whether she saw it or not, I had already built the life that mattered. One defined not by the children I bore or the expectations I met, but by the strength it took to be unapologetically myself. That realization didn't erase the pain of the past, but it softened it. And in that quiet hospital room, with the steady rhythm of the heart monitor echoing between us, I found a peace I hadn't known I was searching for. The next few days after Mom's hospital scare felt like living in a fog, one made of unspoken guilt, cautious tenderness, and years of unresolved tension sitting between us, like a fragile truce. She was discharged after 3 days with strict instructions to rest, avoid stress, and change her diet. Emma and I took turns checking on her, though, as usual, Emma handled it with the ease of someone who'd always known how to make Mom happy. When I visited, it was different. We were polite, almost gentle with each other, but there was still that invisible thread of awkwardness. I brought her groceries, cooked her meals, even sat with her through the evenings, watching her favorite talk shows. She'd smile, thank me, and sometimes, in those quiet moments, I'd catch her staring at me with something unreadable in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or realization. One evening, about a week later, I found her on the couch flipping through old photo albums. She looked up when I entered, her expression soft. "Do you remember this?" she asked, showing me a picture of us from years ago, me at 6, missing my front teeth, proudly holding a messy cake I'd made for her birthday. I smiled despite myself. That was the first time I baked anything. "You insisted on doing it yourself," she said with a faint laugh. "I still remember the kitchen, covered in flour. You were always so determined." Her voice faltered slightly on the last word. Determined. It wasn't the kind of word she used to describe me before. I sat beside her, and for a few minutes, we looked through more pictures, birthdays, school plays, vacations. All moments that once felt simple but now seemed layered with what I knew. The distance, the disapproval, the love that had always come with conditions. Then she said something that caught me off guard. "I talked to Daniel the other day." I blinked. "You what?" She smiled carefully, as though testing the waters. "He called to ask about your favorite food. Said he was cooking dinner for you." I rolled my eyes, half embarrassed, half amused. "He really did that?" "He did," she said, her tone thoughtful. "He's different from the others. You seem happy with him." I hesitated, not wanting to admit how right she was. Daniel had been a quiet constant in my life since we met 3 months ago. He never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. He listened. He saw me, the real me, without trying to fix or define me. Mom's gaze lingered on me for a moment before she spoke again, softly. I hope you hold on to that. Someone who sees you as you are, that's rare. It was strange hearing her say something like that. For years, I'd wanted her validation. Now she was offering it in small, fragile pieces. Later that week, Daniel and I had dinner together. A candlelit table, the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows, and the smell of roasted garlic and rosemary in the air. He'd made my favorite, lemon butter salmon, and teased me when I insisted on helping him with the dishes afterward. So, he said, drying his hands, I met your mom the other day. I laughed. Oh no, what did she say? Actually, he said, smiling, she thanked me for taking care of you. I froze for a second, surprised. That was something my mother never said. She told me she's proud of you, Daniel continued, that you've always been strong, but she never said it enough. I felt my throat tighten. She said that. He nodded.
She did.
And she meant it. I didn't know what to do with that information. For years, I'd imagined hearing those words, I'm proud of you. But now that they were finally here, carried secondhand through someone else, they felt both healing and hollow. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I lay awake thinking about Mom. I realized that her apology, spoken or not, wasn't about her changing overnight. It was about her finally seeing me after years of not looking. But life, as it often does, wasn't done with its twists. 2 weeks later, Emma called again, her voice frantic. Lily, Mom collapsed again. We're at the hospital. My heart dropped. By the time I got there, the doctors were already running tests. I found Emma pacing in the waiting room, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. They think it's her heart again, she said, eyes red and wide. They're keeping her in for monitoring. I hugged her tightly. She'll be okay. She has to be. When we were finally allowed to see her, Mom looked weaker than before, but her spirit, that stubborn fire, was still there. You two look like you've seen a ghost, she said with a small smile. Mom, Emma whispered, sitting by her bedside. You scared us. She reached out, touching Emma's hand. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Then she looked at me. Both of you worry too much. I wanted to believe her, but something about her tone made my stomach twist. A few days later, the doctors gave us the news. Mom's condition was manageable, but she'd need lifestyle changes, more rest, less stress, maybe even a move to somewhere quieter. Emma offered to take her in for a while, but Mom surprised us both. I want to stay with Lily, she said. Emma blinked. Really? Are you sure? Mom nodded. Yes. I think it's time we'd spend some time together. Just us. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I'd wanted her approval for so long, and now, suddenly, she wanted to be in my life more than ever. It felt strange, tender but heavy with all the things we hadn't said. When she moved in, my small apartment transformed. Her presence filled the space, her neatly folded sweaters on the couch, her herbal teas on the counter, her soft humming in the mornings. And slowly, a fragile rhythm formed between us. She'd help me cook dinner, and I'd make her tea before bed. We'd talk about everything, her childhood, my work, Emma's baby. Sometimes we laughed, other times, we just sat in comfortable silence. One night, while we were watching an old movie, she turned to me suddenly. You know, she said quietly, when I told you you'd never give me a grandchild, I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at myself. I looked at her, startled. I pushed you so hard because I thought if you had what I didn't, it would make up for my mistakes, she continued, her eyes glistening. But I didn't see that you were already building something beautiful, your own kind of life. And I was too blind to appreciate it. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. Mom. She reached over, taking my hand. You're everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, Lily. I just didn't know how to say it before. I broke down then, years of hurt, disappointment, and longing spilling out in quiet sobs. She pulled me into her arms, holding me the way she hadn't since I was a child. For the first time, her embrace felt unconditional. That moment didn't erase the past, but it rewrote the way I saw it. A week later, Emma invited us over for dinner. It was the first time we'd all been together since the baby shower. The house was full of laughter and the smell of baked pasta, and when I held my niece for the first time, tiny, warm, her eyes fluttering open, I felt something shift inside me. Mom watched me with a smile, her voice soft. You see? You didn't have to give me a grandchild to make me proud. You've already given me something better. I smiled through tears, holding that baby close. What's that? She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. You gave me back. And in that moment, I finally understood what forgiveness looked like. Not erasing the pain, but finding peace in spite of it. When I walked into my apartment that evening, it felt emptier than usual. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound in the room, and it echoed against the loneliness that had been sitting in my chest for months. I threw my purse onto the couch and sat down, burying my face in my hands. I had spent the entire afternoon with Lily. She was radiant, glowing with that soft joy that only expectant mothers seem to have. She kept talking about baby names, nursery colors, and how Mom was practically living at her house to help decorate the baby's room. I smiled and nodded through it all, pretending I was fine, but every word had stung. When she hugged me goodbye and said, "You'll be the best aunt, Hannah," I almost broke. Aunt, not Mom. Not the woman whose hand a tiny one would grasp. Just the aunt. The spectator. The woman standing on the sidelines while life moved forward without her. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. For months, I'd been trying to ignore that echoing question in my head. What if Mom was right? What if I never gave her a grandchild? What if I never gave myself a family? That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the rain pour down outside. The city lights blurred through the water streaks on the glass, and I thought about everything I had sacrificed for the idea of success. The late nights at work, the relationships I pushed away, the walls I built so no one could hurt me. Maybe Mom wasn't wrong to be disappointed. Maybe she was just cruel in how she said it. But then, another thought crept in, something deeper, darker. Why was her disappointment only aimed at me? Why wasn't she angry at Lily for the chaos she'd made of her own life before getting pregnant? Mom had always protected her, no matter what. When Lily dropped out of college after her freshman year because she was finding herself, Mom defended her. When she broke Dad's favorite vase during a tantrum, Mom said, "She's just emotional." And when she announced she was pregnant, with a man she'd only been dating for 4 months, Mom didn't blink. She threw her arms around her and said, "I'm so proud of you." But me? The daughter who paid her own rent since 21, who bought her first car on her own, who never asked for help, I got told I was wasting my womanhood. It wasn't fair. And the more I thought about it, the more it burned. The next morning, I woke up determined to stop spiraling. I had therapy that day, something I'd started quietly after the baby shower incident. My therapist, Dr. Klein, had a calm voice that always made me feel like I was allowed to breathe. "So," she said, after I told her about the visit with Lily, "you're carrying a lot of guilt that doesn't belong to you." "Guilt?" I asked. "I'm not sure that's it. You feel like you've failed your mother somehow, even though her expectations were unfair," she said. "That's a kind of inherited guilt, the one daughters often feel when their mothers make them responsible for their happiness." That sentence hit me like a quiet explosion. My entire life, I'd been trying to make Mom proud, top grades, good job, stable life. But she only lit up for Lily. Maybe because Lily needed her and I didn't. Dr. Klein continued, "Parents sometimes confuse control for love. But when you stop living for their approval, that's when you start living for yourself." I went home that day with those words carved into my heart. Weeks passed, and Lily gave birth to a baby boy, Noah. Mom called me, crying with joy, her voice trembling through the phone. "He's perfect, Hannah. Just perfect." My first grandchild. She didn't even notice that I hadn't spoken for a full minute. When I finally did, I forced a smile into my voice. "I'm happy for you, Mom." I visited the hospital the next day, bringing flowers and a stuffed elephant for Noah. Lily was glowing, her hair tied back, exhaustion and happiness mixing beautifully on her face. Mom hovered around the baby like a guardian angel, taking photos, adjusting blankets, whispering lullabies. And for a while, I forgot my own hurt. When Lily handed me Noah, and I looked down at his tiny, perfect face, something inside me melted. His small fingers curled around mine instinctively, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known I was missing. But then Mom said, almost absent-mindedly, "He looks just like Lily when she was born." My sweet girl finally made me a grandmother. That warmth turned to ice. I looked at her. She didn't mean it cruelly, but she didn't have to. Her words carried years of favoritism, unspoken but heavy. That night, after I left the hospital, I cried. Not the kind of crying that releases, the kind that feels like something is breaking deeper inside. I wanted to let it go, but something inside me had changed. 2 months later, I ran into an old friend, Mark. We'd gone to college together, dated briefly, and stayed in touch on and off. He was kind, funny, and had this grounded energy that made people trust him. He'd recently moved back to the city after a messy divorce. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner. Talking to him was like taking a deep breath after being underwater too long. He listened, really listened, and one night, when I told him what Mom had said at the baby shower, he looked genuinely angry. "She had no right to say that," he said. "You deserve love and peace, not guilt." I smiled weakly. It's easier to believe that when someone else says it. Over the next few months, Mark became a steady presence in my life. Not romantic, not yet, but comforting, safe. And slowly I began to heal. I spent weekends hiking, started painting again, and even took a short trip alone, something I'd always wanted to do. I sent pictures of the mountains to Lily, and she replied with baby photos of Noah. We began reconnecting in small ways, gentle and cautious. But Mom remained distant. Her calls were shorter, her tone clipped whenever she mentioned Lily's baby milestones. It felt like she was intentionally keeping me out of that circle of joy. Until one afternoon, everything changed. I was leaving work when my phone rang. It was Lily, her voice trembling. "Hannah, can you come over? It's Mom. She's not okay." My heart dropped. When I arrived, Mom was sitting on the couch, pale and shaking. Lily stood beside her, tears in her eyes. I rushed over, kneeling in front of Mom. "What happened?" Mom looked at me, eyes glassy with fear. "The doctor, they found something in my tests. It might be ovarian cancer." The air left my lungs. She started crying, not the proud, guarded tears I was used to, but raw, childlike sobs. "I don't want to die, Hannah. I'm so scared." I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly, my own tears falling silently. In that moment, every grudge, every wound, it all blurred. She wasn't the woman who had hurt me. She was just my mother, terrified. I stayed with her that night, held her hand as she drifted in and out of sleep. And when Lily went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the quiet rise and fall of Mom's chest. All those years, I'd wanted her to see me, to really see me. But now, I just wanted her to live. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of hospital visits and test results. The doctors confirmed it was early-stage cancer, treatable, but serious. Mom started chemotherapy soon after, and I became her caretaker. I drove her to appointments, made her soup when she couldn't eat, and held her hair back when she was sick. Lily helped when she could, but with a newborn, it was hard for her to be there every day. So it fell to me. One evening, after I helped Mom into bed, she reached for my hand. Her skin was cold, fragile. "Hannah," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." I sat beside her. "What is it?" Tears filled her eyes. That day at the baby shower, I said something unforgivable. "I hurt you so deeply, and I've hated myself for it ever since. You've been so kind to me, even after everything I said." "Mom." "No," she said softly, squeezing my hand weakly. "I need to say this. You're the strongest person I know, Hannah.
I was so wrong about you.
I wanted you to live life the way I imagined it, not how you wanted. I thought if I pushed you, you'd want what I wanted, children, marriage, the same dream I had. But I see now you already gave me something better. I frowned through tears. What do you mean? You gave me yourself, she whispered. Your strength. Your loyalty. You've been the one holding us all together. You don't need to give me a grandchild, sweetheart. You already gave me a reason to be proud. That broke me. I cried, clutching her hand, whispering, I forgive you, Mom. And I meant it. That night, after she fell asleep, I stepped out onto the balcony, looking up at the stars. For the first time in years, I felt a quiet kind of peace. Mom's words had healed something I didn't even realize was still bleeding. But deep down, I also knew the story wasn't over yet. Because what came next, 6 months later, would change everything again. And this time, it wouldn't just be about forgiveness. It would be about redemption. 6 months later, the air around me felt different. Calmer, lighter, as if the world had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Mom's chemotherapy had ended 3 weeks earlier. Her hair had started to grow back, soft silver wisps framing her face. She was getting stronger every day, her color returning, her laughter resurfacing in small, fragile doses. I still went over every evening to cook dinner for her. It had become a ritual of sorts, one that neither of us wanted to end. That evening, as I stirred the soup, I heard her humming softly from the couch, the same lullaby she used to sing to Lily when we were little. I smiled to myself, remembering how I used to watch from the doorway, always feeling like the quiet shadow in the background. But now, things were different. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. Mom looked at me now, really looked at me. She asked how my day went, remembered my favorite tea, even laughed at my corny jokes. It felt like we were finally building the bond one had longed for my entire life. When dinner was ready, I brought her a bowl and sat beside her. She took a small sip, then looked at me, eyes glistening. Hannah, she said softly, do you ever think about having kids? My heart skipped. I froze for a moment, then forced a calm smile. Mom, we've been over this. I know, she said quickly, setting the spoon down. I'm not pressuring you. I was thinking, you'd be such a good mother. I sighed quietly, trying not to let the sting show. Maybe. But life doesn't always work out that way. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for mine. You still have time, sweetheart. You're only 32. I wanted to tell her that motherhood wasn't the only measure of a woman's worth, but the way she looked at me, hopeful and trembling, made me stay quiet. Instead, I smiled faintly and said, let's just focus on you getting better first, okay? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something about the conversation unsettled me. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. A few days later, Mom called out of the blue. Her voice was shaky, her words tumbling fast. Hannah, can you come over? It's important. My stomach twisted. Is it your health? Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine, she said quickly. Just please come. When I arrived, Lily was already there, holding Noah on her hip, looking nervous. Mom sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out before her. Mom, I said carefully, walking closer. What's going on? She looked up, her eyes rimmed red. I went to the doctor last week for a follow-up. My chest tightened. And her voice broke. The cancer's back. The room spun. Lily gasped, clutching Noah tighter. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. What? I whispered. But they said. I know, Mom said, her voice trembling. They thought it was gone, but it's aggressive this time. They're talking about another round of chemo, but she trailed off, tears slipping down her cheeks. The doctor said it might not be enough. I sank into the chair beside her, numb. Mom, my voice cracked. What are you saying? She took my hand, squeezing it hard. I don't know how much time I have left. For a long time, none of us spoke. The only sound was Noah babbling softly in Lily's arms. When Mom finally looked up again, there was something desperate, pleading in her eyes. That's why I wanted to talk to you, Hannah. Before it's too late. My heart pounded.
About what?
She hesitated, then said the words that froze my blood. I want you to have a baby. The room fell silent. I stared at her, speechless.
What?
She swallowed hard. Please, just listen. I know I have no right to ask this of you, not after everything I said before. But I've been thinking about it a lot. I want to see you happy. I want to see you with a family before I'm gone. Mom, I said quietly, my throat tightening. This isn't about me being happy. This is about you wanting something to hold on to. Tears welled in her eyes. Maybe. But can you blame me? I don't want to die without knowing you won't be alone. Lily reached out, her voice soft. Mom, maybe we should. No, Lily, Mom said firmly. You already have a family.
You're fine.
But Hannah, she looked back at me, her voice breaking. You've given me everything. You've taken care of me, supported me, been my rock. But one day I won't be here. And who will you have? Her words hit like a knife. I stood up, pacing, trying to breathe. You can't just ask me to have a child because you're dying. She flinched. I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm asking you to do it for yourself. I looked at her, trembling with anger and heartbreak. You don't get to decide what will make me happy. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I don't want to leave this world knowing I failed you. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to throw something, to ask her why she couldn't just love me for who I was, not for who she wanted me to be. But then I saw the fear in her eyes, the raw, childlike fear of someone facing their mortality, and the anger melted into something else. Grief. The next few days were heavy with silence. Mom began her new treatment plan, weaker this time, more fragile. I stayed with her most nights, helping her through the pain, massaging her hands when the nausea hit. But the conversation haunted me. Every time I looked at her, I saw the unspoken plea in her eyes. One night, as I sat by her bed, she said softly, I know I shouldn't have asked you that. I was selfish. I shook my head.
Mom, don't.
Let's not talk about that right now. But she kept going. If you ever change your mind, promise me you'll tell me. Even if it's just an idea, or someone special in your life. I want to go knowing you're not alone. I hesitated. Then, quietly, I said, There's someone. She turned her head weakly toward me, her eyes lighting up for the first time in weeks. There is. I smiled faintly.
Mark.
You remember him, right? From college. Her eyes softened. Of course. You've been seeing him? Kind of, I admitted. We've been close. I don't know what it is yet, but it feels real. It feels safe. She smiled, tears filling her eyes. Then promise me one thing, Hannah. I nodded. What? Don't be afraid to love him. Her voice broke on the last word, and I couldn't stop my tears anymore. I took her hand and pressed it to my cheek. I promise. Over the next few weeks, I started spending more time with Mark. He came over sometimes to help with Mom, fixing the leaky sink, picking up groceries, sitting quietly with her while I cleaned up. She loved him instantly. He's got kind eyes, she told me one night after he left. Hold on to that one. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope stirring again. Maybe not for the life Mom wanted me to have, but for a life that felt real. One that I could build on my own terms. And then, one morning, as I was making breakfast, Mom called me into her room. She was sitting up in bed, pale but smiling faintly. I had a dream last night, she whispered. You were holding a baby girl. She had your eyes. I laughed softly. That's just your medicine talking. But she shook her head. No, Hannah. It felt so real. And when I woke up, I realized something. What? She reached for my hand, her grip trembling but firm. It's not about me wanting a grandchild anymore. It's about you finding someone that makes you feel whole. Whatever that looks like, I'll be happy. My throat tightened. Mom. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Promise me, when I'm gone, you'll keep living. Not just surviving, living. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. I promise. She smiled faintly. Good. That's all I ever wanted. That was the last real conversation we had. 2 weeks later, she slipped away quietly in her sleep, peaceful, serene, her hand resting over her heart. When I got the call, I felt something inside me collapse and expand at once. I had lost her, but I had also finally found her. In her final months, she'd given me the one thing she never had before: understanding. And in that quiet grief, I made her another promise: that I would live the life she finally believed I deserved. Not for her approval, not for her forgiveness, but for myself. The days after Mom's funeral felt like walking through fog. Every sound was muffled, every color dulled. Even the world outside seemed to mourn with me. Gray skies, steady drizzle, and a silence that hung too heavy to bear. The house felt empty without her. Even though I'd spent months there caring for her, the moment I walked in after she was gone, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of moments. Her scarf on the chair, her teacup by the window, the faint scent of lavender lotion she used every night. I sat in her favorite armchair and stared out at the garden she'd loved so much. The roses were blooming, wild, defiant, beautiful, and for the first time, I understood why she'd spent hours tending to them even when she was too weak to stand. It wasn't about flowers. It was about creating life when life itself felt like it was slipping away. Mark was there, quietly hovering in the background, never pushing, never demanding. He cooked for me, stayed the nights I couldn't be alone, and listened when I needed to talk. But he also knew when to leave me with my thoughts. One evening, I sat beside him on the porch, a blanket around my shoulders. The sunset spilled orange across the horizon. She asked me to live, I said quietly. To really live. He looked at me, eyes soft but searching. What does that mean for you? I shrugged. I don't know yet. Maybe it means forgiving her. Maybe it means forgiving myself. For what? He asked gently. For wasting so many years waiting for her to love me. My voice cracked. For thinking that if I worked harder, or smiled brighter, or tried to be more like Lily, she'd finally see me. Mark was silent for a moment. Then he said, "She saw you at the end." I turned to him, tears stinging my eyes.
Yeah.
At the end. He reached over, taking my hand. Sometimes the ending is where we finally start to understand. Something about that stayed with me. 2 weeks later, Lily and I met at Mom's lawyer's office. It was time to finalize her will and estate, the part of grief no one warns you about. Lily arrived with Noah in tow, his chubby fingers clutching her necklace. She looked worn but calm, like she'd been bracing for this. I, on the other hand, felt like I was about to break. The lawyer, a polite man in his 60s, gestured for us to sit. He handed us each a folder and began reading Mom's final letter. "My dear daughters," it began. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone, but I hope you're together." Lily and I exchanged glances. "I've spent too many years keeping score," the letter continued. "Who's married, who's successful, who gave me grandchildren. I thought I was measuring happiness, but I was really measuring my own fear of being forgotten." I bit my lip, already crying. "I owe you both an apology," she wrote. "To Lily for putting so much pressure on you to be perfect, and to Hannah for making you believe you were never enough. You were. You always were." Lily reached over and squeezed my hand. I couldn't speak. The letter went on to say she divided everything equally between us: the house, her savings, even her jewelry. No more competition. No more comparisons. You both get to start fresh. When the lawyer finished, the room fell into quiet. Lily wiped her tears, then whispered, "She really did love us. In her own broken way." I nodded, voice trembling.
Yeah.
She just didn't know how to show it. As we left the office, Lily turned to me in the hallway. "You know what's weird?" she said softly. "I used to envy you." I blinked.
What?
She smiled sadly. "You always seemed so strong. Even when Mom pushed you away, you never gave up. I used to wish I had that kind of strength." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I saw my sister not as the golden child, but as someone who'd been carrying her own weight of expectations and guilt. Maybe we were both just trying to survive her love, I said quietly. Lily nodded, her eyes glistening. Maybe. We hugged, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. Over the next few months, I tried to rebuild my life. Mark and I moved in together. It wasn't planned. It just happened naturally, like two rivers merging without realizing it. He brought laughter back into my days, but never tried to erase the grief. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake thinking about Mom's final words. "You are enough." I repeated them like a mantra, until one day I started to believe them. That was when I made a decision, one that even surprised me. I signed up to volunteer at the local foster care center. It started small, helping with weekend activities, tutoring the teens, organizing art days. But what began as a distraction soon became something deeper. There was one girl, Mia, 10 years old, sharp-tongued but bright-eyed. She reminded me of myself at that age, guarded, afraid to be loved. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone in the corner, sketching flowers on a scrap of paper. "Those are beautiful," I said, sitting beside her. She shrugged. "They're just drawings." I smiled. My mom used to say that about her garden, but they made her happy. Mia glanced at me. Did she draw too? I hesitated.
No.
But she learned how to grow things, even when it was hard. Mia stared at her flowers again. Maybe I can learn that too. Something inside me shifted. That night, I told Mark about her. "She's special," I said. "I can't explain it." He smiled knowingly. "You don't have to. I can see it in your eyes." I laughed softly. "I'm not saying I want to adopt or anything." He shrugged. "You don't have to say it. Just follow whatever makes you feel alive." And for the first time in years, I felt exactly that, alive. One morning, about 6 months after Mom's passing, I got a call from Lily. Her voice was warm but teasing. "So, are you sitting down?" I frowned. "Why?" "You're going to be an Anne again," she said, laughing. I froze, then burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Lily." She giggled. "Yeah, we didn't plan it, but I think Mom would have been thrilled." I smiled. "She would have been over the moon." Then Lily's voice softened. "And she would have been proud of you too, you know. For everything you're doing. For finally living." Her words lingered long after we hung up. A few weeks later, Mark and I were walking through the park when we saw Mia with her caseworker. She ran up to me, grinning, waving a little sketchbook. "Look," she said proudly, flipping it open. "I drew you." There I was, her version of me, sitting under a tree, smiling, surrounded by blooming roses. My throat tightened. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She shrugged shyly. "I wanted to give it to you. 'Cause you always make me feel like I'm not invisible." That broke me. I knelt down and hugged her, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I realized what Mom had meant all along. It wasn't about giving her a grandchild. It was about giving love where it was needed most, in whatever form it came. I didn't need to bear a child to be a mother. I could nurture, protect, and love just the same. That night, as I stood by my window, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You were right, Mom. I'm living." And I swear, for just a moment, I could feel her there, not judging, not disappointed, just proud. The next morning, I called the foster care center and told them I wanted to start the process of becoming a long-term mentor, maybe even more someday. Mark smiled when I told him. "You'd make an incredible mom," he said softly. I smiled back, tears in my eyes. Maybe I already am. 6 months after Mom had whispered that cruel sentence at the baby shower, "You'll never give me a grandchild," she had begged for one. But in the end, what she truly gave me was something far greater. The courage to become someone I never thought I could be. A woman who didn't measure her worth by anyone's expectations. A woman who found love, not through obligation, but through choice. And as I looked at the drawing Mia had made of me, surrounded by flowers, I finally understood. Life doesn't always bloom the way we expect. But when it does, it's beautiful all the same. For weeks after that phone call, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. My mother's voice, trembling, desperate, haunted me in the quiet moments. Please, Emma, you're all I have left. Once, those words might have broken me. Now, they just echoed like the faint sound of something I used to care about but had long since let go. I didn't call her back. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to protect the peace I had fought so damn hard to build. Life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. After leaving my old apartment and cutting ties with my family, I moved into a small house by the coast. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and windows that howled when the wind picked up, but it was mine. The sea became my therapist. Every morning I'd walk barefoot on the sand, letting the waves erase my footprints, as if the past could be washed away just as easily. Work had also become a source of quiet joy. My photography studio had finally started to gain recognition. I specialized in maternity and newborn shoots. Ironic, maybe, given everything that had happened, but it gave me a sense of renewal. I saw in other women what I'd once lost in myself: hope. I remember one session vividly. A young woman, maybe 28, came in for her maternity shoot. She was glowing but nervous, her hands constantly fluttering over her belly. I guided her gently, showing her how to relax, how to embrace her body. When the session ended, she hugged me and whispered, "You made me feel beautiful again." I smiled, blinking back tears. That's when I realized healing doesn't come from pretending the pain never existed. It comes from turning that pain into something that matters. But even as I moved forward, part of me still ached for closure. I hadn't seen my sister, Claire, since the baby shower, that night when Mom's words had cut through me like glass. I'd heard through mutual friends that she'd had a baby girl named Lily. A sweet, ironic twist, the same name I used to tell my mother I'd give my first daughter. One gray afternoon, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. My stomach tightened as I unfolded it. "Emma, I know I don't deserve to ask anything from you. I hurt you in ways a mother never should. I see that now. I was cruel because I was scared that I'd lose the only version of family I knew how to control. I thought if I pushed you, maybe you'd stay close, maybe you'd need me. Now I sit in this house alone. Claire doesn't visit. She's struggling, her husband left, and she's barely holding on. Sometimes I look at Lily and think, she could have been Emma's. I hate myself for that thought, but it comes anyway. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, please come home. Even if just for a cup of tea. Love, Mom." I stared at the page until the words blurred. For years, I'd imagined what an apology might sound like, but never like this. Not so human. Not from her. That night, I sat by the window, listening to the waves crash against the rocks, thinking about everything that letter stirred up. Forgiveness. That word felt heavy, almost impossible. But maybe forgiveness wasn't about her. Maybe it was about setting myself free. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove back to my hometown. The road felt both familiar and foreign. The same oak trees lining the curve, the same fading "Welcome to Easton" sign that used to make me roll my eyes as a teen. But I was no longer that girl desperate for approval. I was walking into this as a woman who knew her worth. When I pulled up to my mother's house, it looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown. I almost didn't recognize it. She opened the door before I even knocked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her hair was thinner, her posture softer, her face mapped with new lines of sorrow. "Emma," she whispered. I nodded. "Hi, Mom." She stepped aside silently and I walked in. The house smelled the same, lavender and lemon polish, but it felt emptier, quieter. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd cried years ago, and she poured me tea with trembling hands. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either." She gave a faint smile, eyes glistening. "You look different." "I feel different." There was a long silence, then she said softly, "I'm sorry. For everything.
For what I said that day.
For what I made you believe about yourself." Her voice cracked. "You were right, you know. You always were. Love isn't something to earn. It's something to give." I watched her struggle with the words, the same woman who once could slice me apart with a look now sitting in front of me, raw and fragile. For the first time, I didn't feel small around her. "Mom," I said quietly, "you hurt me more than I thought I could be hurt. You made me feel like I'd failed before I ever began. But I can't live with hate anymore. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she hesitated, looking away. "Claire's been having a hard time. She needs help with Lily. I know I have no right to ask, but..." I took a deep breath. "I'll visit her," I said finally. "Not for you. For her." Later that afternoon, I drove to Claire's apartment. The air was heavy with rain, and my heart pounded as I climbed the stairs. I hadn't seen her in almost 2 years. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her, tired eyes, messy hair, wearing a loose sweatshirt. "Emma," she said, shocked. "Hey," I said softly. "Can I come in?" Her eyes welled up instantly, and she nodded. Inside, toys were scattered across the floor, bottles stacked by the sink. A baby's giggle floated from a small bassinet. "That's Lily?" I asked. Claire smiled weakly.
Yeah.
"Want to hold her?" When she placed the tiny bundle in my arms, something inside me broke open. Lily's eyes, bright and curious, met mine, and all the resentment I'd carried dissolved into something pure.
Love.
We talked for hours about the past, about everything we didn't say. She admitted she'd followed Mom's lead at the shower because she didn't know how to stand up to her. "I was jealous," she confessed quietly. "You always seemed so sure of yourself. I thought if I had what you didn't, maybe I'd finally be seen." I told her I wasn't sure of myself at all. I'd just learned how to survive. We cried, then laughed, realizing how much we'd both lost by letting our mother's voice define us. As I drove back home that night, the storm cleared, leaving the sky streaked with pink and gold. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair. For the first time in years, I felt light. A few weeks later, I received a message from Mom. A photo, Lily sitting on her lap, both of them smiling. Below it, she'd written, "Healing starts small, but it's happening. Thank you." I smiled. Maybe some stories don't end with revenge or perfect redemption. Maybe some just soften with time. Months passed. My studio flourished. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a couple came in for a shoot, holding a small baby girl. The mother looked nervous, like the young woman from before. I helped her adjust her dress, guided her hand to her baby's cheek. "Don't worry," I said gently. "You're doing beautifully." She smiled, and in that moment, I saw my younger self, the girl who once believed she wasn't enough, who let someone else's judgment dictate her worth. But that girl was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had learned the most powerful truth of all. You can't control who hurts you, but you can choose who you become after. That night, I stood by the shore again, watching the waves roll in under the moonlight. I whispered to the sea, "I forgive you, Mom. I forgive all of it." The wind carried my words away, and I knew they'd reached where they needed to go. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't weakness. It's the quiet kind of strength, the kind that lets you finally breathe again. And for the first time in a very long time, I did.